समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Geopolitics with Swasti, where our consulting editor for strategic and international affairs, Dr. Swasti Rao, takes your questions, dear members, on the world, geopolitics, India's position, our neighbors, everything that comes our way. We have an overwhelming amount of questions this time.
I was seeing that, yes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've had to skip an episode, but we have made sure to include your questions this time. So I'll club their questions because the world has moved and so have we and so have you. So we'll take questions on the Iran situation on West Asia, US-Israel, and we'll club them together. So we have a couple questions from Rima. We have one question from Ashish, another from Bluetooth X6W. So all of them are on Iran. We know that a ceasefire has been announced, and today the Hormuz restoration was declared by Iran. Trump's talked about Lebanon, Netanyahu replied. So just take us through it and give us what's happening.
Well, a lot of variables there actually. I mean, that's I think that's a good way to take forward the conversation, because most of the questions I noticed are having to do with some aspect of understanding the situation in the region and what is happening. So there are many variables. So let's just first understand what is happening. There is a ceasefire which was announced between United States and Iran, which is still holding. And even though the first round of Islamabad talks, so to say, did not yield to any outcome, which was, if you remember, from the American side when J.D. Vance had gone along with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. So that round did not really yield any results. But now we know that there is a situation where they are going to be meeting again in Islamabad, perhaps very soon. And we already know some contours of what is being discussed, because if we've been looking at a few, posts on social media, and especially coming from White House and Donald Trump, we already have an assessment. So first, just talk about, US and Iran, and then we can talk a little bit about Israel and Lebanon. Okay. And these two are, right now, even the other side, I mean, Israel and Lebanon are also right now under a ceasefire. And they also met in the United States, and Marco Rubio sort of, hosted those talks. So let's just take it one by one, and I think it will be clear. So first and foremost, it seems that Iran has agreed to deal. And according to Donald Trump, the deal pretty much is in America's favor, no matter which way you look at it, because I'm sure all of you are keeping track of how it's unfolding. Iran had blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, and we were, I think, everybody understood, the sensitivity and the global vulnerability around the Strait of Hormuz, because so much of global energy supplies were passing from it. And I think for weeks now we have been discussing what are the second order and the third order implications. And of course, India has also been vulnerable. Now, what the US did after the Islamabad round of talks failed, the ceasefire did continue, but Donald Trump kind of surprised everybody a few days ago when he said that he is now going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz selectively for Iranian ships which are leaving or bound to Iranian ports. And just, I think, about 24 hours or about 36 hours into that blockade, we saw that Iran supplies to China started getting affected, and China gave a statement which is quite contrary to China's, behind closed doors kind of diplomacy. China is always a very quiet actor in these matters. But China gave a statement asking Iran to, open the Strait of Hormuz, because obviously everybody feels that, and especially China was feeling that economic pinch. Now, coming back, so the situation we had, at least until about, a few hours ago, was that Iran has agreed to completely open the Strait of Hormuz, while the United States CENTCOM, their blockade is still in place. right? So that's the first part. And the second part is that there seems to be a deal around the fact that Iran has agreed to give up on enrichment of uranium. And according to Donald Trump, they have also agreed to hand over the already enriched uranium, which is about 60%. And according to the reports, we think that this is about 400 kilograms. And we still do not know what are the final conditions, because the final conditions will be perhaps shared in a while, maybe tomorrow, maybe when we are sleeping, because we're recording this on Friday. So maybe, tonight when it'll be daytime in the US, perhaps we will see more development on it. So maybe tomorrow morning we learn more exact contours of what is happening. But what we do know is that according to Donald Trump, Iran has agreed to hand over the 400 kg of enriched uranium, perhaps not directly to the United States, but maybe to a third country. Now, who that third country is, whether it's Russia, whether it's Turkey, whether it's China, we do not know. And so there is no reason to speculate, but we do know that this is one part of the agreement. Second, again, according to Donald Trump, he has said that Iran has also agreed to stop enriching uranium, not for 20 years, but forever. This is what Donald Trump has said. I would take his words with a pinch of salt, because what we have learned from Donald Trump is that he says things. I mean, he has there's a characteristic bluster in which he sort of announces things and he says things, and a lot of fine details sort of come much later. So perhaps there would be, we would see if there is some, some duration which is also woven into this particular agreement. But for now, this is what Donald Trump has said. So as of now, I think it looks very clearly that Iran was not able to withstand the economic pressure. We definitely know that after about 47 days of, last few days they were not being bombed, but let's say, roughly speaking, about 42 days of being bombed, they definitely, their military capabilities are significantly degraded. And also remember that these terms are between United States and Iran. We still do not have Israel here.
Right.
And remember, one of the reasons that made Iran, IRGC, to be exact, agree to the ceasefire talks in the first place was Israeli attack on the South Pars field, from where Iran gets its own domestic natural gas, which is one of the largest natural gas gas fields out there, for which America had given an assurance to Iran that Israel is not going to strike them, and Israel struck them. So what I basically intend to convey here is that the situation right now definitely seems as if Iran has given in, perhaps because of economic pressure. And the only statement that we have seen coming from the Iranian side is that they have opened the Strait of Hormuz completely, which is a complete reversal of where things were until 6 weeks ago. Immediately after this announcement, Brent crude oil has already, now that we are shooting it, for this episode, I checked the prices. The Brent crude oil has already dropped to about $83 per barrel. If you remember, for weeks, it was around 120, 126, and people were saying all sorts of things about how far it can go. Now, what it shows is, I think this is all bare facts on the ground. But if you ask what my opinion on this and what kind of a geopolitical takeaway should we have from here, one is that we should be waiting for more details to emerge, and second, I think the world has to be prepared for a scenario where rising oil prices or energy crises and those kind of things are not going to determine America's behavior. We did see that America carried on doing what it was doing for about 6 weeks, regardless of how high the prices were. Okay, so this is something which makes things very, I would say, unpredictable, because a lot of American earlier foreign policy behavior, particularly military behavior, was quite constrained by how sensitive the world was to these oil shocks, right? So there are plenty of reasons for the why this is happening. Of course, I cannot explain everything. America, this particular war, even though it has created inflationary pressures on America, so the price of gas has gone up in America, the price of other things have gone up, the price of fertilizers have gone up in America, but America has had record, exports of crude oil. Okay, America's the largest crude oil exports America has ever seen. The last high was seen in 2023 when it touched about 5.3 million barrels per day. Now it has already touched about 5.2
Right.
it's hovering around that range. So I mean, basically one has to see that if you take a collective view, yes, the war has been very expensive. It has cost, I mean, the different estimates tell us it has cost America about 25-30 billion dollars, all the bombing and everything. It has also caused a lot of inflationary pressure on the rest of the world as well as on the US. But third, we did see that Donald Trump sort of got away with what he intended to get away.
Right.
Now, whether or not this last part and the story is complete, we will only be able to know once more details come out. I think one marker would be if Donald Trump or CENTCOM is lifting their blockade on the Strait of Hormuz once the talks are done. I would be a little conservative and not expect too much, but yes, this is where things are. Now comes the Israel question, because there's a question related to
Right.
that as well. Now, Israel and Lebanon are right now also, and their talks, which were hosted by Marco Rubio, were historic to say the least, because this is the first ever time the state of Israel and the state of Lebanon were directly talking to each other. Now, very quickly, that has several loopholes, although officially it has been welcomed both by the Lebanese side and the Israeli side. And we've seen, a lot of, those kind of proclamations saying how historic this is, and the Middle East is changing and the Levant is changing. Actually, that region is more a region of Levant. But I think if you look carefully and read between the lines, there are certain loopholes there. The biggest loophole is that ceasefire, um, Hezbollah, it should apply to Hezbollah. We don't know where the question of Hezbollah really is. The problem is that Hezbollah is more powerful than the Lebanese state.
Right.
So, whatever conversation Israel and Lebanon are having, it doesn't make sense until, you take into consideration what is the Hezbollah position on it. Does the Lebanese state have the capabilities to really get rid of Hezbollah?
Right.
Maybe sooner than later they will, but right now, do they have the capability? Yes, now with Iranian support cut off, we might expect things to be a little bit, worse for Hezbollah. But is it tantamount to saying that now it is the end of Hezbollah? Now, in my analysis, I have called the situation that yes, Hezbollah indeed is fighting its last war, because with all the training, the money, and all the resources coming from IRGC being choked off, you cannot expect Hezbollah to sort of just operate in vacuum, especially at a time when Israel has sort of crossed all red lines and has been bombing them, left, right, and center. Now, that's one question which is still not very clear, Sapika. So I would be a little, again, conservative on expecting too much out of it. Second, and most importantly, if you read the ceasefire, it says that while there is ceasefire, but Israel is free to start bombing or take defensive action in case its survival is a threat. Now, how do you define the
Right.
situation is where the problem usually is, because while the ceasefire was announced yesterday, but today morning, Israel had already struck certain
Yeah.
targets in Lebanon, saying that they were Hezbollah targets. So that situation is a little bit murky, but I would concede to the fact that the kind of progress we have seen has been quite historic. So we have to give it to them. So, long and short, this is what is happening in the Middle East situation, that the Strait of Hormuz is open. We are waiting for the final talks again, which are going to be happening in Islamabad, and the Israel-Lebanon scene is not very, very clear, but we
Right.
hope to see some progress on that front.
Right. What a way to encapsulate that, Swasti.
Yeah.
And so I'll take one question
Hmm.
on the role of Russia and China, and then
Acha.
we'll move back closer home.
Yeah.
So this question is by Bluetooth X6W. They're asking, are Russia and China helping Iranian regime by providing weaponry in order to keep USA engaged in Gulf War 3?
Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable argument. You see, Russia doesn't have the bandwidth to really support Iran too much because of its long-standing war in Ukraine.
Right.
This is not the first time. Russia couldn't play any role in protecting Assad. The same Assad regime was earlier propped up by Russia militarily and active military support. Russia used to operate a naval base and an air base. So, if Russia couldn't do anything at the time when Assad's regime fell like a house of cards, when al-Shara, took over, and then a similar situation repeated in the 12-day war. We saw when the first time the US and Israel sort of co-deployed their capabilities against Iran, when they were taking out all the Fordo facilities, nuclear enrichment facility in June 2025, the 12-day war. The same Russian, so to say, limitation was once again very visible when we saw how the United States Delta forces took out Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela. I think nobody that really understands what is happening in the Ukraine war and how entrenched Russia is and how desperate Russia is to actually at least take the region of Donbass, I think they don't have the bandwidth. They were not expected to have that bandwidth. Very quickly, yes, there has been some, missiles and replenishments that have come from Russia, but nothing substantive. Okay, that's the first part. The second part is where we still do not have confirmations,
Right.
but I think sooner than later the confirmations would arrive, and they were quite instrumental in helping Iran. The first was the role of intelligence and the role of satellite imagery, helping Iran to strike Gulf and American targets. So I still don't have confirmatory sort of reports on it, but I have read a great deal about how Russians were enabling, facilitating and enabling and helping Iranians to target more precisely, because Iranians, remember, do not have very precise weapons like the Americans
Right.
and the Israelis. Okay, so that is a role that Russia perhaps has played. I think as time goes by, we will get more, solid evidence about it. But then I think that is one role that Russia has played. And the other role that Russia has played, and I would say quite effectively so, is that Russia has also sent a huge consignment of either full-fledged Shahid drones or at least components that can be assembled quickly for the Shahid drones, because Shahid drones have been very instrumental. Most of the
Right.
damage that has happened, especially in the GCC countries and around, has happened because of Shahid. And initially, it was Iran that was sending the thousands of Shahid drones to Russia. Those were Shahid 136. Russia copied them, made their own Gerans out of them, updated those Gerans. And in this particular war, we saw not the Shahid 136s, but we saw the Shahid 238s. And 238s are basically upgraded Shahids, upgraded Gerans, and then Russians sent that back. Now, like I said, it is not simply put on record, but there are enough records, enough reports to argue that perhaps this has happened.
Right.
But nothing could happen beyond that. So that is the Russian part. As far as the Chinese have been concerned, I have gone on record saying again and again that after the first round of the 12-day war, I think in my own discussions with the Iranians, my colleagues, the people, the military intelligence people in the region, etc., I think if there was one consensus that everybody had, this way or that, it was that the second round would happen and China is going to play a more visible role in the second round. Now, the question here is, how do you define that visible role? Did it mean that China is going to be sending its advanced weaponry? We did not see that. We did see that China has sent radars and EW sort of components, etc. China sent the HQ-9
Right.
air defenses. Now, those HQ-9 air defenses weren't really instrumental in saving Iranian targets, so to say. But like I said, that China plays the long game. I think for China is not preparing for fighting, a war in Iran or fighting a war in Russia. China is preparing to fight a war with the only country it considers a real peer, which is United States. And China has never really fought a military battle with the United
Right.
States. So many of these theaters that you see, Sabika, China's strategic calculus there is to get battle tested data on how the advanced American and Western weapons are performing. And using that data, China then sort of incorporates those learnings and upgrades the threat library of the equipment it uses, which are the real equipment. So don't be under the impression that the HQ-9s that are sent to Iran are the HQ-9s that China uses. So these are sort of, how do I say, these are like, the perfect alibis to get battle tested data on the most advanced patriots and the most advanced precise weaponry that United States has. That's the second part. The other part is definitely economic, where it was always known that Iran's, at least 90% of Iranian exports go to China. Again, it is not official and not on record. So if you were to look at the Chinese, papers, you would not see the same percentage reflecting, but it is known because most of the oil used to go by, shadow fleets. Okay. And what the American blockade of Hormuz did, when they said that no ship leaving Iranian ports is going to pass by. So even if you have Iranian oil on something and it has to go to China, it has to exit the Emirati ports or other ports or Omani ports. It cannot go from Iranian ports. So that was also a kind of one of the concomitant, so to say, related impacts of that decision was a crackdown on the shadow fleets also. So China felt that that pain, and China then asked Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. But yes, diplomatically we have seen China supporting Iran. We have also seen militarily, although in militarily it's more dual use and those kind of things. China also has huge investments. So this is by and large what the Chinese and the Russian angle has been. I would say it is still quite limited because, contrary to what you may be thinking, but China is extremely, extremely wary of not getting into any kind of a direct standoff or a direct confrontation with the United States,
Okay.
especially under Donald Trump.
Okay. That is quite interesting, actually. But we have to move back closer home, and we have actually quite a sharp question by Ajinkya. He's asking, whichever way we put it, India's absence at the diplomatic table is telling. How is Pakistan, which is more closely aligned to China, still able to maintain good relations with the US and hence finds itself at the center stage of world diplomacy, while US has effectively frozen ties with India because of petty disagreements on person-to-person level? Is it down to appeasement of Trump, under-the-table crypto dealings, or is there something deeper that we are missing?
Well, first thing, United States relations with India are not in a freeze anymore. I think if you carefully see and if you carefully see, notice the momentum, which obviously can be better. We expected it to be better, but things are back on track. We obviously have to make peace with the fact that Quad is no longer the centerpiece of United States foreign policy under
Right.
Trump. And India is no longer the sole counterweight to China in the Indo-Pacific under Donald Trump. We have to make peace with it. Why has it happened? It is a longer discussion on how Donald Trump has started more wars instead of ending wars, and instead of basically staying true to his election promise, which was a very, very different world. He promised a very different world to the Americans, and in at least in the first year we have seen him doing everything else but that. Okay, so this is a longer discussion on why it happened. If there is a tussle between Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Donald Trump, etc., I think we have discussed these things a lot.
Right.
But I would still stick my neck out and say that it is wrong to assume that the relations between the United States and India are in some sort of freeze. Just one thing I wanted to add here, Sabika, which I missed, when you asked me about the updates on Hormuz. Scott Bessent recently, I think it was just yesterday or maybe just today morning, I saw his statements, and he said that the sanction relief that United States had provided to Iranian oil and Russian oil, that waiver that US had provided, and because of the waiver, India had started to get as much Russian oil as possible. Now they are not going to extend it. So you could say that then this again could be a bit of a
Right.
problem for India, because of course that was something which was a favorable situation for India at a time when we felt that pressure of the global crude prices going up like that. However, I don't think it's a freeze. I think we have to make peace with certain things. That United States has a different orientation, and India has to keep working in national interest. We have seen a lot of positive foreign policy changes in India with respect to how India has also doubled down on utilizing the underutilized relationships with European powers. I don't know if you notice, just every other day or every other week, there is an update of either an Indian high level minister in some European country or a European head of state in India. And it's, I mean, if you go back and if you start counting, you lose counts, the
Yes.
number of times that they have been, meeting. That's one. Second, with Japan. So I think one has to understand that Donald Trump has basically somewhere told us the reality of how he looks at the world. And because of sheer American military and economic might in the world, this is true for any great power. What we refer to as global order, or what we refer to as world order, is basically decided by the behavior of the great
Right.
powers. So the era that we are living in right now, and without getting sort of personal, and without getting into how we would like the world to be, I think if you see how the world is, you see that the core difference is that America still has, while America is no longer, we are in some ways living in a post-American world, but because America is no longer the security guarantor, and America is no longer the security provider, again, not by default but also by design. I mean, American administration today does not have any interest in instating democratic regimes the way we saw just after the Cold War, right?
Right.
So but we do see that America today, because of its sheer might, is able to affect the manner in which power is distributed and affect the behavior of other powers. And therefore you see all the middle order powers coming together and understanding that they have more to do in common, rather than relying on Donald Trump and on America, because America has lost its credibility.
Right.
The point here to understand is that under Donald Trump, America seems to not care about it. Now, so we will see how it plays out, but this is where things are. As far as Islamabad is concerned, I took some latitude to explain that, because I do see that a lot of people keep saying that Indian American relationships are in a bit of a freeze. It's probably not the most perfect statement to describe the state of affairs. Coming back, as far as Pakistan is concerned, yes, I think we must give credit where due. I think giving credit where due is also a part of responsible statecraft. I don't think India has anything to worry about it. I personally would have liked India to offer itself as a place where other or warring parties can meet and talk. Mediation is not about always getting a deal out. Mediation is basically about securing a seat on the table, because you are able, in a fluid situation, you're able to have some kind of a leverage to shape conversations around it. Okay.
Right.
Now, you can go on arguing that Pakistan, and I have argued myself that Pakistan could have done the talking. It doesn't have the leverage to drive an outcome, which is fine. End of the day, I'm playing with words. The fact of the matter is that Pakistan, which is a $500 billion economy, a very polarized country, a lot of internal problems, internally unstable, and all the other issues that Pakistan has about in terms of, how it exports terrorism to other countries, etc., is still a country that has been able to have excellent ties with United States, with China, also with Russia. Pakistan-Russia economy has been growing, and it should be a matter of concern to us. Excellent ties with Turkey, excellent ties with Saudi Arabia. As we are talking, not only is Pakistan hosting and seems to be hosting, I always argued that it will be Pakistan, not because of the favorite, Field Marshal Asim Munir. That's a very superficial reason. If you read my pieces, I've argued that Pakistan has genuine stakes. Pakistan has a genuine stake with Iran, genuine stake with the rest of the region, and Pakistan needs to be, a kind of an actor, kind of a player there in shaping that conversation, because it's directly impacting Pakistan's security imperatives. Okay, if you read my pieces, you can read more details there. But coming back, so it's not just about that. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Qatar seem to be getting closer, in terms of the defense cooperation, etc. So we will see that a rise in the diplomatic profile of Pakistan has happened in the Middle East. And I think what, from India's perspective, instead of sort of, berating it or sort of cribbing about it, I think a more productive discussion could be around understanding Pakistan's stakes. And second argument could be, yes, I mean, it is not always about stakes. Indian establishment has taken a call to not be a part of it. But if you ask my opinion, and here I'm just stating my opinion, I think if we consider ourselves a big enough country and consider ourselves a relevant enough country at the global stage, I think, and if we say that our voice counts, then these are the situations when we had to display how our voice counts. And definitely, without a doubt, if you've been reading what the Emiratis have been saying, they've been saying categorically that they would have liked India to do that, because India is a more responsible stakeholder, a more dependable stakeholder. But anyway, that's my opinion. So I agree with you when you say that. I mean, no matter which way you look at it, this is a win situation for Pakistan. They are also getting some, I think some economic aid now from Saudi Arabia. They are getting some money from Saudi Arabia. So we will see, whatever. But this is another story for another day. As far as this particular point is concerned, I agree with you.
Another conflict that's going on in the world that maybe we are not paying as much attention to because there are bigger wars being fought is what's happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Oh, yes.
And Sunil has sent a question on this. They're asking you to simplify for them. What is the current situation? What is the backdrop behind Pakistan and Afghanistan cross-border clashes that at one point got so violent?
Yeah.
What does Afghanistan want and what does Pakistan want? And is India mostly out of this conflict?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a. I would love to really talk about it, longer. But yes, let's just try to talk about the most important details. It all starts from a very famous tea party that didn't go well for Pakistan.
Right.
If you remember, in 2021, when the current Taliban took over Afghanistan, firstly, of course, Pakistan was very happy. It didn't go out the way it wanted. Right now, the problem is that there is an organization which was founded in 2007 called the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is also referred to as Pakistan Taliban. And Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is a radical organization that wants to overthrow the Pakistani state because it wants to usher in the Sharia law, etc. And they want to overthrow the Pakistani state, and they are active in certain regions of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, etc. Pakistan says that they are operating from Afghanistan. They have bases in Afghanistan. Afghanistan says that Afghanistan as in Taliban in Afghanistan says that we do not have anything to do with TTP.
Okay.
Pakistan says nahi tum hi log karwa rahe ho. So again, this is a jhagda which has been going on since almost, it started after 2021. There have been lot of heated exchanges, etc. If I just sort of fast forward a bit and come to the present times, I think the deadliest attack that Pakistan did on Afghanistan under this pretext that the TTP camps are being run from inside Afghan territory. It happened in around October 2025.
Okay.
When the Pakistani Air Force just went in and just bombed them left, right, and center, and got back. And of course, the Taliban retaliated. The Taliban said the Pakistanis started it. The Pakistanis said that these started it. So it's been going on. And much related to that also is the question of Pashtun nationalism, because if you remember that there is an imaginary Durand line that divides Pakistan from Afghanistan. Pakistan says that that is the legal border. Afghanistan says that's not the legal border because it basically divides Pashtuns on two sides, on either side. And again, this has been sort of drawn in the same manner in which, the British divided us. So it's an unfinished project. Now, that question is at the heart of all these problems. But coming back, as far as this particular issue is concerned, the deadliest attack came in October 2025. October or August, I think it was August perhaps, but around that time in 2025. Back then, of course, some countries quickly jumped in to help the situation, and those countries were Qatar and Turkey. And then the final, so to say, a more lasting ceasefire was mediated by Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And all of that again fell apart because in February 2026, we saw it coming back, and Pakistan bombing again, and the Afghan and the Taliban, retaliating. And right now it started again in March. On I think 16th of March or around the first fortnight of March, there was again strikes from the Pakistani side and from their side. And now in April, we are in April, and even in April, just some days ago, there've again been strikes. So this is a situation which has been simmering and going. I would say this is continuing. The Pakistani defense minister has called it Khwaja. What is his name?
Khwaja Asif.
Khwaja Asif. So Asif has called it an open war. Basically, this is a problem, and for Pakistan, it becomes a problem because then Pakistan has another separatism going on towards the south side, which is the Baloch separatism. So yeah, these are internal instabilities for Pakistan. Both these things, of course, Baloch insurgency is a much longer, much older phenomena, but the Afghan-Pakistan problem is centered around the activities of TTP and what the Pakistan says. Now, in terms of the military part, just you should know a little bit that there is, while India, of course, because of the Taliban are friendlier to India, so of course, from our perspective, we obviously try to support them, give them a moral support, a strategic support, etc. But as far as the capabilities are concerned, Pakistani Air Force has much, much, much better conventional superiority compared to the Taliban. And while the Taliban are better at guerrilla warfare, so they are better at guerrilla warfare, and that is the pattern of damage also. You see, the Pakistanis would perhaps do more of strikes, and they would indiscriminately kill children, women, etc. While the Afghans are better, and the Taliban's, they are better at, perpetrating these localized guerrilla conflicts, which are, like a suicide bombing or throwing a bomb, etc. So this is going on. Frankly, I just want to add one factor here, which is of China, because China has been trying quite, I would say, desperately to get this thing under control.
Right.
China has also lately started a trilateral framework of negotiation and dialogue called, China, Pakistan, Afghanistan trilateral. And as recently as April, I think again between 1st and 7th April, in Urumqi. Urumqi is the capital of Xinjiang region in China. They held these talks face to face again. Why China does that is because China has investments in Afghanistan. China has its star performer, or at least which was something that was considered to be a star performer, expected to be a star performer, the CPEC in Pakistan. And none of this is working out very well because of this constant infighting between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The Chinese would have ideally wanted to connect Gwadar and, to Afghanistan, basically bring Afghanistan into the CPEC fold. That is also not happening. It's another dukh bhari kahani for them, because the Baloch insurgents are constantly attacking all the Chinese investments in Gwadar. If you see Gwadar is in the Baloch region of Pakistan. So China would want to stabilize the region, but China is not able to do so because, like I said, that even though a direct talks did happen in the first week of April, and now we are in the second or third week of, we're inching towards the third week of April, but still there is a war going on, and I don't see any end to that.
Right, right. Now, the next question is by Narendra Arya. He's asking, if at any time India can recover POK back to India, what advantage will we have in the changed geopolitical scenario?
So, in my opinion, there would never be a geopolitical context or a situation where India would be able to take back POK. Not because Pakistan is a formidable military actor here, or Pakistan's military capabilities are formidable. It is because of China's support. Remember that there was a little part of the Pakistan occupied Kashmir called the Shaksgam Valley, which was ceded to China by Pakistan in 1963, which was 1 year after India lost its war with China in 1962.
Right.
So currently, the 5,100 square kilometer of Indian territory that was occupied by Pakistan was ceded to China, and China is sitting on the territory, and China has developed bases. They are literally breathing down our neck there. And that's one part. Second, so China is anyway a party to POK now.
Right.
First. Second, in Operation Sindoor, we saw the level and the degree to which China came to support Pakistan, and we also somewhere realized from the learnings of the first day's BVR battle that the Chinese Pakistanis have practiced their multi-domain warfare capabilities and network-centric warfare for at least more than 1 decade.
Right.
So basically, the thing that I wish to convey to you is that will there be a situation if you isolate these factors separately? Why not? India has capacity to take back Kashmir today, The problem is not that. The problem is India prepared to handle the factor of the Chinese propping up of Pakistan?
Right.
Remember, I mean, the key takeaway from Operation Sindoor is that as long as China has a Pakistan to bleed India, it doesn't need to open an active front with India. And remember that India is one of the most cyber attacked countries in the world, and all the cyber attacks are coming from China. So the gray zone destabilization on that border and an active front from China, active front with Pakistan, that is in fact our worst case scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't think there will be a geopolitical moment optimum enough,
Yeah.
for us to take back. What do you mean by taking back?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just about land grabbing. It is also about readying your population and your infrastructure and everything for what is going to follow. So I don't think so.
Right. Swasti, so we have a question on India's Rafale purchase program. So I'll
Okay.
take that first and then we'll close the episode with Europe. Anubhav Saxena has asked, where are we related to the 114 Rafale purchase program? Is there any advanced level talks happening between India and France? Or due to lack of code transfer, India has shut doors on the deal?
The source code issue is a creation of Indian Twitter. It is not a real issue. Why? Because no country is going to give you source code. The Indian Air Force is not bothered about source code. All these things that you keep reading on Indian Twitter, or if you things that you keep reading in a lot of these platforms, they are not authentic platforms. Okay, the problem is not there. Um, the Dassault Aviation has told us we don't have a problem with sort of deploying or sort of indigenizing the Rafale that you we want to sell you. So, for example, if you want your missiles on, if you want your radars on, if you want your whatever capabilities on it, whatever sajawat you want around it, they said that we will do it for you. This is the time it will take. This is the money it will take. This is what the Dassault Aviation has done for the Rafales they had sold to UAE.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's not that they're treating India with some sort of unfairness by not giving us the source code. Don't believe it. It is an Indian social media chatter. That's what it is. The real problem is what we have not been able to decide is that the Indian side, if you remember the deal, it says that out of the 114 Rafales which would be ordered, some of it is going to be bought off the shelf, which means we are going to ship it directly from France or from the Soy Aviation's plants, wherever they may be in France. But a large part of that consignment is going to be co-produced in India, and some Indian actor or some Indian player is going to do it in a joint venture with the SAW, right? What the Indian side is insisting on is that the SAW Aviation must give guarantees for those Rafales or those jets which would be manufactured in India. The SAW Aviation is saying we are willing to give you guarantees for the jets that we give you from our side, but we will not give you guarantees for the ones that you make in India.
Right.
Okay, I think this is one real issue, and because of that, we still do not have a final, so to say, final deal on how much what is going to cost, because India wants its own, things, its own subsystems to be integrated with Rafales. That's why I'm saying we will do it, but we will not give you the source code.
Right.
Okay. But I told you the problem is not there. The problem is with respect to whether or not we are going to get the guarantee. In my opinion, India, it is very likely that India will still go ahead with the deal, because I think some kind of a middle ground will be found. This is a deal which is quite important for India, because I've always maintained in my earlier recordings for the GPS that the original demand of the Indian Air Force was always to go for at least 114 MRFAs, but what we got was just 36.
Right.
So we have the capacity to absorb. When I say the capacity, we have the hangars, we have the logistics, we have the MRO facilities, our pilots are trained, we already have a supply chain of all the spare parts, etc. So it's already in place, right? So we have the capacity to absorb at least 100 more jets from the SAW Aviation. Um, I I think that the two sides are going to reach some kind of a deal sooner than later, because it is a win-win situation for both. Remember that UAE has recently cancelled their own Rafale deal, which was basically an advanced version of Rafales that they were going to co-produce with France. So obviously there is also pressure on France and on the Soy Aviation. I think this will happen, but this is where the things are, as far as I know. Yeah.
Right. Swasti, for our last question, I want to take Senapati's question. He's asking, as Europe ramps up its defense spending under Trump's pressure, how will the surge in global arms demand disadvantage India? And what should our strategy be to counter this impact?
The surge in global arms demand is going to happen, and Europe is modernizing. In fact, Europe is modernizing in an unprecedented manner. If I can just give you a little bit of a figure to wrap your heads around, by 2029 it is expected. I mean, Europe is already spending close to, in 2025, 2026, they have already reached about 400 billion. And when I say Europe, I mean the EU countries. Okay, I haven't looked at the figures for UK, because then that's a different ball game, and then I have to look at NATO figures, etc., because NATO then has Turkey also, NATO then has US also, so of course then the equation changes a bit. But talking about Europe, so in 2024 they were spending around 340 billion. I think now they're already spending more than 400 billion, and we are in 2026. By 2029 the numbers are that this is going to go up to 800 billion, 1 trillion almost.
Right.
In that sense, the Europeans are going to be spending very soon, in a few years' time, almost as much as the Americans are spending. Americans defense budget today is 1 trillion, a little bit more than 1 trillion. European combined spending is going to go beyond the American
Right.
spending. This is my forecast, simply because they have realized that they cannot rely on American security guarantees, not only because of what Donald Trump has been literally drilling into their heads left, right, and center, and for a while now, but also because they saw that even when the United States was meant to provide a security assurance and guarantee to the Gulf countries, it still could not, because
Right.
despite having US bases and everything, the Gulf countries did get targeted by Iran. And this is what the reality of the war is, that the war very quickly starts in a conventional manner, very quickly turns attritional. And once it turns attritional, the nature of weapons with which the war is being fought completely changes. You might have the most advanced fighter jets in the world, but you still have to, factor in a situation where the other side is inflicting much bigger damage on you by cheaper drones. So what do you do about it? How do you integrate your air defenses around it? So European spending is going to outdo the US spending if you take it collectively by 2029, 2020, 2030. The biggest defense spending is again coming from the biggest economies. So France, Germany, also the Nordic countries, the Scandinavian countries like Denmark and
Right.
Netherlands and Sweden and Finland, and they have big budgets, etc. But again, it is not to say that everything is hunky dory for Europe, because even though they have one of the world's largest defense conglomerates, but their defense conglomerates have never catered to their own armed
Right.
forces, okay? Because of a specific way in which the European order was established, because they were relying on America and NATO and Article 5 as their backstop, and they were just basically focusing on creating and cultivating economic relations with
Right.
cheap Russian energy and cheap manufacturing from China. So quickly, your question is, how does it put India at a disadvantage? I think it puts India at a disadvantage if India is unable, because of our whatever attitude that we seem to have about, being a fence sitter, not being proactive. Yes, it is true. I mean, if you compare India with many other countries that are more proactive, I'll give you an example for you to sort of compare so that you understand. But I think that if India is not able to pluck the low hanging fruits, I think it would be a disadvantage for India, because Europe's military modernization cannot be taken care of only by United States or European actors. I can give you an example of an Indo-Pacific country that is playing a huge role in Europe's military modernization, and that country is South Korea.
Okay.
That they have already signed on to the SAFE, program, which has sort of unlocked $150 billion, etc. They have also another, way of $650 billion, and then individually also European countries are doing a lot. So European military modernization, a large part of it is definitely going to go to the US, because the weapons are such. They will also do it just as we have Make in India, they have Make in Europe, okay? But then again, like I said, that even then the money itself is so huge that I told you these countries that are playing a huge role. Until now, Israel was another country that was playing a huge role in Europe's military
Right.
modernization. In fact, um, biggest defense exports from Israel have been going to Europe. The first country to put an embargo on it has been Spain, because of a special reason, and I think I'm going to be talking a little bit more about it in my coming whatever recordings. But apart from Spain, we still see that Israel is obviously playing a huge
Of
role,
course.
but now you see that Israel is also having to replenish its own stocks. So my opinion is that the opportunity is right there for India. India obviously cannot produce or export advanced platforms for Europe, because it's very NATO interoperable and they have a certain standard. But India can definitely play a role, for example, with the ammunition, with making the classic ammunition into smart ammunition. We already have a supply chain running via Europe, etc. We already are a net defense exporter. The question is that, are we able to really chip in, because there is a lot of money that is going to be spent from the Europeans, and just as they are getting more mistrustful of Americans, and just as we are getting more mistrustful
Right.
for of Americans, I see that sooner than later Canada and UK are also going to join hands, and this will in fact widen the scope of the defense spending. So
Right.
India is going to be at a disadvantage if India doesn't learn to sort of partake into those supply chains. And second, another disadvantage that I see for India is that, because of so much preoccupation with their own security modernization, we might see a lot of delay.
Right.
right? So the first priority then for the aviation would be ramping up the security architecture in France instead of first clearing their order books. So how do you tackle that? You tackle that by joining in and saying that fine, make in India, make for Europe, and make for the rest of the world. That's the whole point of the DAP 2020 reforms and the DAP 2025 updates. So that we have to keep an eye on that low hanging fruit.
Right, right. So, see, this was such an interesting conversation because I think we were able to see how India plays into all of these different relationships and everything that's going on into the world. And
We still haven't been able to take all the questions because it is
Right.
impossible, but we are going to
Right.
be back soon, I think,
Right,
Yeah,
of
this time
course.
around we won't be away this long. Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll make
Hopefully.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking all the questions from our incredible viewers and answering them so sharply. We'll be back again next week with another episode of Geopolitics with Swasti.